Well, it's this great day of canonisations, so you'll have to forgive me and bear with me if I get my John Paul II stories out of the way. I was 20, the end of my first year at university, and I had a holiday in Rome, and we were staying at the Irish College near the Colosseum, and this was completely unplanned. We turned up with our suitcases at 10 o'clock in the evening at the Irish College. We're given our keys, and the receptionist said, "Oh, by the way, the Irish bishops are staying here today, and there's a coach leaving at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning if you want to go to Mass with Pope John Paul II at Castel Gandolfo." So we puzzled for about 3 seconds, and then we said, "OK then," and we were on the coach the next morning. So Mass with Pope John Paul II in 1987. But this is what ruined it. Just as we went into the chapel, one of the priests concelebrating said, "Stephen, I'm concelebrating Mass with the Pope. Take this camera. Take as many pictures as you can." Yeah? It's an opportunity I will never have again. And I just got caught up in the fluster of it, and I spent the whole hour and a half on the back row trying to get these photos to make this priest happy, to make his day, ducking in and out of the people in front of me, snapping left, right and centre. And I got to the end of the Mass and the end of the day, and I thought, I haven't been here for one single second. I gave him the camera, he had some beautiful photos, and I felt sick inside, really. You know when you just realise you've missed something? I was the whole time behind the lens, doing a job. Not looking, not listening, not praying. That's my first story. There is a reason for these stories. 8 years later, I'm a seminarian in Rome, and I had one of my pastoral placements at the Centro San Lorenzo, which is a youth centre in St. Peter's, run by the Emmanuel community. And again, almost out of nowhere, a message came round. We're invited to go to Mass with Pope John Paul II, his early morning Mass in his private chapel, just as a group. This was like 3 days later. And I felt like I'd been given back a chance, and I swore to myself, all I'm going to do is pray. And it was in the time when John Paul II, well, it was all his life, he would pray for an hour before his morning Mass in the chapel, kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament. And all the guests would go into the chapel an hour before. And I just remember going to the chapel thinking, this is about prayer. This is about being with the Holy Father, praying with him, praying for his intentions, praying for that hour before Mass in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, and then praying during the Mass. And it was a very simple, very beautiful time for me. And we met him afterwards, we shook his hand, and I remember saying to myself, I'm not going to go to the press office and get a photograph. Yeah? Because I wanted it to be about prayer. And I realised that I'd missed that 8 years before. Why do I say that? Well, I wanted to get my stories out the way, of course. I can tell you many more. But I tell you that because I learned something then. And I think it's important to remember on the day of the canonisation of John the 23rd, John Paul II, and also on this octave day of Easter, the 8th day. It's that my devotion to the saints, to John Paul II in this case, at the beginning it was something to do with me being a spectator. Yeah, that first time. And my priest friend. Yeah, I went there and I wanted to look. I wanted to get the photos for myself and my friend. I wanted to stare. And I realised gradually, in the moment, but over those years, that my faith in the Lord and my love for the saints, and in this case John Paul II, it wasn't about being a spectator, it was about being a participant. It wasn't about looking them as a celebrity, it was about following them in the path of Jesus Christ. And instead of admiring the person, of course there's much to admire in the great saints, in our leaders and pastors, and the little saints, but much more important is being drawn into what makes them the person they are. Who makes them the person they are? Jesus Christ, the Saviour. I was in danger of worshipping the celebrity instead of worshipping what they worshipped, which is the Lord. Reminds me of another phrase I heard someone said to me once. When the finger of the prophet points up to the sky, it is the madman who looks at the finger. We're meant to look where they're looking. We're meant to see what they're pointing to. This is true for John Paul II, it's true for John the 23rd, it's true for all the wonderful saints that we celebrate in our faith. And just to connect this with Easter and my week, sorry to be so personal, so I've been on retreat for the last week since Easter Monday. I went to a lovely centre near Lille in northern France, run by the Notre Dame de Vie community. I went there for the peace and the quiet and the walks and the prayerfulness and the fact that you get cheese and wine with every meal. It being France and it being Easter week. So I've had a very peaceful time, and if my voice goes during Mass, it's because I haven't spoken for 6 days, literally, apart from to say the Eucharistic prayer in concelebration. But I spent much of the week, really, reflecting on the Easter Vigil, really. Thinking about the Easter candle that burns at my right here, the honour of carrying that, acting as the deacon myself, into the darkened church on the Easter Vigil. And how the light, it loses its effect here in the glorious sunlight, but how the light of that candle could fill the whole church by itself and then could light the candles that each one of us were carrying as we came in. And that this was not just about light, it was about fire. The fire of God's love, the fire of faith, which set light to everything that it touched, including 2 people's hair that evening. I won't embarrass you by pointing it out. Anyway, it was quite a beautifully dangerous evening in terms of faith and fire and celebration. Not just light and fire. What else do you notice in a darkened church when you look at the candle? It's the slipstream. Yeah? It's how the bits of dust, everything around the candle, is drawn into the air that rises around the candle. The candle lights, it sets fire, it warms, and it catches us up in its stream that rises up to heaven in praise and worship. This is part of what we celebrated, and it's part of what we continue to celebrate. And I was thinking about the 3 baptisms that we had here at Newman House, and how lovely that all 3 of our neophytes and newly baptised are here at Mass this morning. Of how brave they were to come forward for baptism into the unknown. Of their own faith and the faith of their friends and the communities that had supported them. Not just here, but in the past. Of how they'd taken the risk of letting themselves be transformed. Of kneeling in the Easter water and not just being sprinkled or dropped, but having buckets of water poured over them so that it touched every single part of their being. Of how they took on a new identity. The names. Gregory already had a Christian name, so he was baptized with his name, Gregory. But how Jun and Zihui took new names, just by coincidence for different reasons. They both took the name of Claire. Not to renounce their former identity and all the blessings they'd been given through their homeland, their family, their friends, but to take on, to be clothed in, renewed with a new identity, the identity of Jesus Christ. And to have that symbolically by taking on their baptismal garments. And I don't know about you, but I've never been to a celebration of Easter where the adults truly wear Easter garments. And that they wore them for the whole of the Mass and for the whole of the party, and that they are all over Facebook now. And I nearly insisted that they wear them at Mass this morning, but I thought I won't embarrass them for the 20th time this week. But you know that in the old, early tradition of the church, the neophytes had to wear their baptismal gowns for 40 days. Sorry, 40 days, 50 days. Thank you, Chris. 50 days. The whole 50 days of Easter, Eastertide. Out in the streets, in the shops, everywhere they went. Here am I, a new Christian. I've clothed myself in Christ. And all of this we are celebrating throughout Easter time, and especially today in the Easter octave. And we see all this in the Gospel. We see how this is such an important line. The doors were closed in the room where the disciples were. They were in the upper room, afraid, in the dark, with the door closed, firmly locked. A place where there was no possibility, it seemed, that the Lord could come and shed his light and his warmth and his fire. But into this place steps Jesus, his holy presence, his light, his warmth. And it's for us to believe that he wants, especially in this Easter time, to step into our lives in a new way. And for this to be very concrete, that the places in your life, the areas, the times, the moments, the situations where you felt the door is firmly shut, there's no way Jesus can come here, there's no way I want him here, there's no way he's going to find the time or the trouble or the means to come here. I don't know what that place is, but that place where he hasn't been, that he wants to step in and say to you, peace be with you. And to bring a transforming peace into your life. This is what he did on that Easter night. This is what he did again with doubting Thomas 8 days later. And it's what he did again and again in the breaking of the bread that we heard about in the Acts of the Apostles, which we're celebrating now in this Holy Eucharist. Let me end with one true story. So I've told you about the Mass and the baptisms and the party afterwards. And then there was another little bit of liturgy that took place at 1 o'clock in the morning on Easter night. And it was called the emptying of the baptismal font. Some of you haven't heard of that, have you? Well, nor had we until 1:55 on Easter morning. So we noticed that there was a patch of wet water around the font, and that it was gradually, slowly leaking out its 500 litres of water. And it was a question of letting it leak over the whole church or emptying it. So a group of us had half an hour with buckets and cups and requisition bins, processing from the font into the garden and drowning those poor pot plants in the garden with the holy water until we finally emptied the font. Now, tragedy, you might think. Yes, a wonderful day and it's all gone wrong. But not at all. Not at all. I think it was the final blessing of Easter night. Because the water in the font is not for us. It's for others. We've been baptized in it already. In one sense, we don't need it anymore. It's done its job. We sprinkle, we renew our baptismal vows, we make the sign of the cross, but we need about 100 centilitres to go in the pot of holy water at the back of the church, no more. The Easter baptismal water is not for us, it's for others. It's meant to be taken out of here in our lives and in our faith. It's meant to give new life and water and hope and, God willing, faith and baptism to those who don't know about Jesus. It's meant to water those poor pot plants outside, which are probably drowned by now. It's meant to water the whole world. And actually, theologically, the water in the baptismal font is meant to be flowing water, living water. Not a dead, stagnant pool, but a raging river that flows in from the temple of Christ, from his wounded heart, a living stream, the blood and water of the sacraments, into the baptismal font, over the newly baptized, and out into the world. That's the ultimate meaning of the baptismal water, and it's the ultimate meaning of our faith. So thank God for Easter, thank God for our newly baptized, thank God for the leaky font. It's all about living our faith, not just for ourselves, but for others.